So, good morning. It's a good day and good morning because Steve Legler is here. Steve, how are you?
I'm good, Doug. I'm glad to be with you for this, whatever this is going to turn into, and who knows?
Right,
Doesn't
little
matter.
conversation. Well, let's talk about your story because it's a fascinating one. We've had a few lively conversations. You've got a background in family business and ownership, and now as a family business advisor. So you've got multiple hats. Tell us your story, please.
Okay, so I was born into a family business where my dad was an immigrant entrepreneur and had started a business about a year before I was born. And I was the third child of my parents, but the first boy. And so this was 1964, and so the girls were not really expected to play much of a role in this business, which was in steel fabrication, kind of a heavy industry, dirty field. And I remember from my earliest recollections being basically told that my duty was to take over my dad's business eventually. And so I grew up with that understanding, worked there every summer of high school. And then I graduated from McGill with a business degree because, of course, I had studied business because I was supposed to go take over a business. And went and worked for the business for about 3 years before leaving to go do my MBA so I could really come back and take this business to the next level. And lo and behold, the day I got back with my MBA, I was 26. My dad calls me into his office on the first day and says, close the door, sit down, we got to do something. All our markets are disappearing, so we got to close, sell, merge something. And long story short, 6 months later, we were no longer a 250 employee company. We were a 4-person company
Ooh.
because we had sold all our operations to a competitor. 2 of those 4 employees were named Steve Legler. I had the junior at the end of my name, and I was not the one who had a farm to go off to breed cattle, so that my dad did that.
Yeah.
And I ended up running what we would call today a family office, which it was 1991. I didn't know what a family office was for probably another decade. So that's the backstory.
And you were in Montreal or near
So
Montreal? Where was this?
yeah, this was in Montreal.
Yeah.
This was in Montreal, Canada. And so I kind of got stuck in a position where there was too much to walk away from, but not enough to get me excited.
Mhm.
And I reluctantly admit that I let that exist sort of for a couple of decades before I sort of snapped out of it and realized there was a lot more that I wanted to do and could do.
Mhm.
And I stumbled into a program in Toronto called Family Enterprise Advisor, which actually came out of Vancouver from the University of British Columbia. And this was a program that they had started to get people who work with business families and family businesses to understand the language of family business so that they could serve those clients better. And most of the people in that were people who worked for banks, they were asset managers, they were selling life insurance, they were accountants. And I was sitting in that classroom with about 20 other people that I had nothing in common with.
Mm.
But there were people at the front of the room who were talking about all the cool things they were doing with families, helping them figure out their vision, their values, having family retreats, planning their succession, all this kind of stuff. And that's when the light went on for me. And I was like, wait a sec, that's a thing? Like
Yeah.
doing that is a thing? That's the thing I want to do. And oh my God, I finally figured out what I really wanted to do when I grew up. And I was 48 at the time. So
And
that was
let me
in
interrupt.
2013.
That's a great story because I think it's pretty representative for a lot of folks, isn't it? Who maybe are G2 or G3. They've got some assets, they've got some maybe time, and it took you a little time to articulate what you needed, what you wanted, and then you were in this room. And now you realize that there's another profession out there. So you're moving from ownership to family office management, and now you're moving to the third wheel or bucket of being an advisor. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate. And that the biggest thing was I knew other people who had come from a family business background that decided to become consultants to family businesses. And a lot of them just figured this is an easy switch. I'll just, turn 90 degrees and start doing this. And I thought that was kind of disingenuous. And I realized that there's a lot different skills
Yeah.
that go into being an advisor. So I jumped into the deep end
Yeah.
of learning. And so taking coaching, learning about facilitation, mediation, all those things, because I realized that the skill set to be able to work with families is completely different. So I was already bringing a lot of experience to it, but I needed to work on my skills of actually being able to work with family groups of people.
Like all of us, I suppose. So you realized what you wanted to do. You saw the folks in the front of the room. You learned from this network, I imagine. And then
Yep.
what? You you found some clients. You wrote a
Well,
book,
I
I
found
think,
some
in the
clients. I
process.
wrote a book. I started blogging. I started like, so I felt like I was playing a lot of catch up. So when you run your own family office, you don't necessarily want everyone to know that you exist or where you are, because a lot of people are looking for those kind of clients to pitch them all sorts of services and
Services.
investments. And so I had done a good job of laying very low, and I had my profile was like this deep. And all of a sudden now I want to, work with other families. I want them to know who I am. So I feel like I was, cranking that jack in the box, and finally I sprung out, and now I needed to work on building my brand. And I did that largely by creating a lot of content. I started blogging every week, and I managed to get pretty well known in this space by a lot of people, which helped my profile, which helped bring me a few clients to give me some more experience and more stuff to write about it.
That's
Here we
perfect.
are.
So I imagine somebody listening might be a little confused about whatever a family office is. You were family business G3 son, I guess, or
No,
G2 son,
G2.
G2, and then you emerged for 20 years or so, and you managed a family office. So what the heck's a family office?
So a family office, usually the way a family office comes into existence is after a liquidity event. So the family will have this business that grandpa started, this wealth from a physical asset to a liquid asset, but we still have the family. We're still trying to support the family. So how do we invest this money? How do we manage it? How do we make sure it continues to grow? How do we still continue to involve people from the family in all the decisions around it? And so it family offices can run the gamut from taking care of, doing everyone's taxes, to preparing everyone's wills, to paying someone to manage their fleet of airplanes on, at the other extreme. So family people say if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office, because every family office is custom made for the family for whom they're doing the work.
How common is it to have a family office of one named Steve?
Um, Probably more common than you'd think. And with the technology these days, what you would call more like a virtual family office that doesn't necessarily have a physical space. But I mean, I know people who work for some big families where there's like 30 people in the office that take care of things. And I've been at family office conferences where, everyone flies in on the family's private jet. So it really, there's probably, well, that's the other thing. People don't know how many family offices there are because of what I was referring to earlier. People don't want to be known.
Right.
And a lot of family offices don't consider themselves family offices. So it's somebody who's taking care of managing some assets on behalf of a group of family members.
So now you've begun to blog, and you built your brand, and you built your reputation, and you're emerging as an advisor with all that expertise. Why is it that some people are, I think, reluctant to hire family advisors, and others are more open to hiring advisors? Do you have a sense of that?
So
Is it organizational maturity? That's my theme, Steve.
um, I I think, well, there's something about maturity, and I don't know if it's organizational or an acceptance by certain leaders. I was the founder of the company. He didn't want to expand to other people to bring in a board of advisors or a board of directors, and that's something that family businesses, if they want to last a number of generations, almost always have to get to that step. But even just bringing in outside advisors, I think most family businesses have advisors that come in and help them on the business stuff
Mhm.
and maybe on the ownership and all that. But it's the family stuff that I know that if somebody would have come to my dad at the time and said, I think I could come and work with you and your family. And if they had given him a business card that said so and so PhD, like psychologist, my dad would have said, hey, screw you, we're not crazy. And so I think there's a reluctance to bring people in, even on the business side, but especially so on the family side, which is where I've chosen to focus my practice, because I realized with the work that I did in these last few years that it's actually the circle I have the most natural skill in, and the ability to work with people around the table that all have the same last name and I have a different last name.
So
Those are
that's
kind of situations I like, where everyone is related and I come in as the outsider, where I'm not part of their system, but I can come in and sort of understand what's going on in their system and help them to relate to each other by like holding up a mirror of what I see that they don't see, the same way that my fish in the aquarium don't know that they're in a fish tank because they're in it.
right.
But when I look at them, I see that they're there. And it's the same thing when I sit around the table with a family.
Talk about the trends that you see next for your role there as a family business advisor. And the reason I'm asking is information is more like our conversation right now, technologically delivered, it's virtual. You happen to be in New Brunswick, I happen to be in Nashville, and we're on a Zoom call. And as people learn more about resources for their families, they might be more inclined to bring you in, right? So,
Yes, and it's easier than ever. It's easier than ever to do that, because I've been doing coaching over Zoom for a while now before this pandemic, and I love it. And I think it opens up so many things. And I've worked with clients that I've never actually physically met, and that's becoming more of a reality. So I'm excited about the opportunities that that brings. I know I have a lot of colleagues who do this kind of work with family groups, and we've been talking about how to adapt what we would normally do in a room together to this method of doing it over Zoom. And there are some challenges when working with a group, but I think one of the things I've started to work towards is to just do more one-on-one coaching.
mhm.
So a family is a system of interdependent people. And in order for that system to change and make progress, yes, everyone in the system needs to sort of change, but you can effectuate some change by dealing with one person. So
Mhm.
one person who's from such a family who hires a coach to work with them and to meet with them every couple of weeks, and in between they go and do the work with their family, silently or psychologically or subconsciously or not, they're usually wanting the person to change back because they're resistant to change. So that's why that person can benefit from having a coach to help them work through this, to know that they should expect it, to know how to prepare for it, and to know how to deal with it, and then come back and sort of say, hey, what do I do as the next step, to start making the change more permanent within the family.
That's perfect. I can imagine you doing some work with consultants who are working with at the team level or the family level, and you might be at the individual level. And I can also imagine you doing more facilitation when you're ready and you've got the family here on the screen, for instance. And if you're coaching them in certain behaviors or outcomes, or based on your conversations with kid one, kid two will see it this way, mom will see it this way, dad will see it, whatever the, I'm sure you've had that experience in some manner, and it's
Yep.
often revealing. It's often shocking and really
Yeah,
constructive for the family.
it can be really interesting to like spend a lot of time with one person and get their viewpoint, and then later when you come into a meeting with others, you sort of figure you know all the people because you've heard about them, and then some of them are spot on and some of them are going to be way different than what you expected, and that's okay too. You have to realize that what you're hearing from this one person is one side of the story,
Yeah.
and it can be difficult if there's any conflict in a family. If you start working with one and then they want to bring you in with someone else, it can be very difficult if there's conflict, because then you'll quickly be painted as so and so's guy. But if the anxiety level is relatively low and there's not too much friction, a person can work with one and then come in and work with the family.
Right. And another approach that I imagine you've done is just to have touch-based meetings, especially during the pandemic and COVID. So by asking, how are you taking care of yourself? how you're taking care of your loved ones, and how you're taking care of your business. Now everybody's on the screen. And if this one says, I'm not sleeping, and this one says, I'm drinking more than ever, you as the external facilitator can manage that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's there. There's a lot of the possibilities with the technology. I think the biggest thing it's done is it's demonstrated how easy it is to get together. And
Mhm,
so what used to be a quarterly face-to-face meeting that lasts a half a day can now instead be a half an hour every 2 weeks or an hour every month.
mhm.
And so you stay more current with people and you have the opportunity to sort of catch up with each other. And that's actually more healthy than just the occasional long meeting. And I
Yep.
think people are starting to understand the possibilities of this technology, and sometimes they just need someone to sort of poke them and prod them into that direction and point out that, hey, realize that since you've started to do this, things have gone better. Maybe you should start to incorporate that. It all comes down as an outsider to a system is to sort of help them see things that they aren't seeing for themselves.
Mhm.
And if you can help them to start to see some little tweaks that they can do with what they have been doing so that they can start to work better together, then that's the service you're rendering for that family, is you're bringing them along and you're sort of poking and prodding them to work together better than they ever have.
I love that, and I love your point about frequency. So it being shorter, providing more regular feedback. So how do folks contact Steve Legler? Legler, right?
Yeah, it's so I'm lucky in that I have a name that's easy to spell. There's only one vowel in my name. It's an E, and it shows up 4 times. Steve
How about
Legler.
that? That's
It's
clever.
easy to spell. It's easy to pronounce, and yet it's not common. So if you Google me, if you just put my name, I'll probably show up. If you put family business in there, I will definitely show up like right at the top. And so my website is called Shift Your Family Business, because that was the name of my first book. And there's all kinds of stuff on there written by me, or podcasts where I'm the guest, podcasts where I'm the host,
Right.
videos, white papers, blogs coming out the wazoo, and happy to talk to anyone about family business issues. No obligation. Let's start talking and see if there's a way that I can be a resource for another family. We'll figure that out. If it makes sense, we'll go forward.
You are one of the most generous people and well-connected people in the family business network or sector that I'm aware of. So I'm certainly um, quick to endorse.
I thank you for saying that, because I sort of feel like I stumbled into that, but it's because of what I like to do. And I do know a lot of people,
Yep.
and I like to connect people because I still feel this whole industry is in its infancy and needs to get better. And I don't think we get better at each other's expense. I think we get better at helping raise the level for everyone. And I want to be part of that.
You're part of it in this conversation, my friend.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to pause this and then we'll keep going.